The tariff panic is overblown because American car buyers aren't really the target. If you turn on any mainstream media and you think that 25% tariff on European vehicles is about to crush American car buyers overnight with higher prices and fewer choices, that economic fallout, that usual fear cycle, well, that's not exactly true. But here's what they're not telling you. For most Americans, this isn't a crisis. It's a strategy. And if you understand how the auto industry actually works, you'll see why the sky is not falling. When President Donald Trump floated raising tariffs on vehicles from the European Union to 25%, the narrative immediately turned negative. The assumption was simple. Higher tariffs equal higher prices and consumers lose out. That's a convenient storyline. It's also incomplete. So let's start with what the policy is really designed to do. It's not about punishing American buyers. It's about forcing alignment. For years, the U.S. has operated under an uneven playing field. Europeans charge roughly 10% tariff on American vehicles entering into its market, while the U.S. has historically charged only 2.5% on passenger cars coming from Europe. And it has shaped where vehicles are sold, built, and priced for decades. But the imbalance goes beyond tariffs. European regulatory standards, everything from emission systems to safety certification, often act as barriers that make it harder for American vehicles to compete overseas. These aren't always labeled as trade restrictions, but in practice, they limit access. The result is a market where European brands sell freely in the US, while American automakers face a more complicated path in Europe. And that's what the tariff push is targeting. The goal is straightforward. If Europe wants access to U.S. markets, then American vehicles should have the fair access to European consumers. And that means addressing tariffs. But it also means working toward compatible safety and regulatory standards, which may seem impossible, but it is possible. Because in other words, this is about reciprocity. Now let's address the biggest misconception. This will not hit the average American car buyer the way headlines suggest. If you're shopping for a vehicle built in the United States, whether it carries a domestic badge or not, you're largely insulated. Many vehicles sold here are built here, including those European brands like BMW and Mercedes and others. They're already assembled in American plants. Those vehicles don't face the same tariff exposure because they're not being imported. That's a critical point the media keeps glossing over. This policy actually reinforces domestic production. It encourages automakers to build more vehicles in the United States, which stabilizes supply and in many cases keeps pricing more competitive for mainstream buyers. There are a few brands that will be impacted by the tariffs, mostly high-end imports like Porsche, Lamborghini, Ferrari, and similar brands. These vehicles are built overseas and shipped in, and they're going to face higher costs as tariffs rise. And that's not going to impact their buyers, because here's the reality. Their buyers aren't making decisions based on a few percentage points in price. If you're spending six figures on a performance car or a luxury car, a tariff increase isn't what's stopping you. The market operates differently. It's driven by brand loyalty, exclusivity, and performance, and big money, not incremental price sensitivity. So while those vehicles may see price adjustments, it's not going to ripple through the broader market the way some are suggesting. And that brings us back to the bigger picture. This isn't about triggering a consumer crisis. It's about resetting a relationship. The 2025 framework agreement between the US and Europe was supposed to move both sides toward a more balanced trade, lower tariffs, fewer barriers, and greater market access, working together for safety and regulation. But implementation has stalled, and both sides have accused each other of failing to follow through. There's no clean, legally enforceable breach here. What we're seeing instead is a negotiation that's shifting more cooperation to pressure. Tariffs are leverage. They're meant to push Europe back to the table and move toward a system where American automakers can compete on an equal footing overseas, just as European brands do here. And if that happens, it changes everything. More access for American cars in Europe means more volume, more scale, and potentially more competitive pricing globally. Aligning safety and regulatory standards reduces friction in the system, making it easier for vehicles to be sold across markets without costly redesigns or compliance hurdles. That's not a short-term win. That's a long-term structural shift. Of course, none of this makes for dramatic headlines. It's easier to say tariffs will hurt consumers than to explain how global supply chain production strategies work and trade negotiations actually work. But if you're serious about understanding the auto industry, you have to look beyond the surface. Because the truth is, the policy is as much about strengthening the domestic industry as it is about negotiating with Europe. More production in the US means more jobs, more investments, and more resilient supply chains. It also means that automakers who want to compete here will have to think carefully about where they build, not just what they sell. For consumers, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can lead to more vehicles being built closer to home, with fewer disruptions tied to global shipping and geopolitical tensions. It can also create a more stable pricing environment for the vehicles most Americans actually want to buy. So no, this isn't the disaster it's being portrayed as on the mainstream media. It's a pressure tactic, a calculated move to push for fairer trade terms and more balance in the automotive market. And while there may be some impact at the high end, the average American buyer is not the primary target here, even though others say so. The real goal is simple. If they want to sell here, we should be able to sell there. And until that happens, don't expect this fight to go away. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this, and check out our car review channel, Car Smarts. You can support me by buying me a cup of coffee, and if you want even more content, check out the links in the description. I'm Lauren Fix. Thank you so much for watching.